work I'm doing would maybe relate a little bit to the supervision element. Like what I'm doing is with older adults, we're looking at community-based interventions for older adults. So we're looking at how we deliver resistance training programs to older adults here. We're going down a more community-based route, trying to take it out of gyms and labs. But the concept of supervision is something we're looking at, and I know you've kind of done a little bit on that. I suppose maybe a lot. You,
No, I think a little bit is accurate, more accurate than a lot for sure. It was just one study.
Yeah, I suppose it's it's still the work that'll go into it. But can you maybe talk through what we mean by supervised versus unsupervised? Because I think it sounds really obvious, like oh, you'll have a trainer standing beside you or a coach standing beside you, but maybe it goes a little bit beyond that.
Yeah. So are we like recording? Are we jumping right in? Like
right in,
no kissing.
Okay. Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if I should give you like we're just chilling answer or like actually go into it. So, yeah, with respect to supervision in general, within the context of our study, it literally just meant that research assistants or authors on the paper were there watching you do the exercise, with some interjection as well. So it wasn't like we were just giving them a program and watching them do it. We were giving them a program, cueing them, encouraging them to do more, all that kind of stuff. Stuff that we worked with the other group, the non-supervised group, with like in the prior to the actual study starting. But yeah, it wasn't just sitting there and watching them. It was watching them and kind of like, like how you would as a personal trainer, except a little bit differently. Like for those of you who have been involved in research and you're a personal trainer, which is most people who are involved in like this type of research have also done some sort of training in their career. So it's a little different in that we're not like manipulating exercises. Looks like if you have a subject say, oh, this is kind of bothering my shoulder, you don't say, okay, we'll switch to a different exercise. You kind of have to be like, sorry, lower the weight a little bit, but you're just going to have to stick to the protocol that we have, right? So it's a little different, but we wanted to keep it as ecologically valid as we could, meaning we wanted that like supervision to kind of replicate personal training as much as it possibly could without hindering the actual like internal validity of the study itself.
Yeah, and we've done quite similar to what you've done, where we had an unsupervised resistance training program. We delivered remotely, unsupervised versus supervised through Zoom. This was a while back during COVID. But I suppose it's that ecological validity where there has to be some degree of parity between the two training groups. And how did you kind of control for cueing and maybe some of the feedback? I suppose that's maybe where an awful lot of what we see an awful lot of the element of supervision being is the soft skills, and nearly there is no amount of troubleshooting you could do with participants to get parity across those two groups.
So with respect to how we controlled for cueing, do you mean within the supervised group? Like how did we make sure that each research assistant is cueing the same, or how did we control for that between groups?
Both.
So between groups, obviously there's no control. That's kind of what we meant by you're literally just, and that's kind of not even ecologically valid to like online coaching either. Because when Dr. Schoenfeld and I were like originally proposing the study, we were talking about doing weekly check-ins and stuff. And that would have been way better, except it would have been a bitch to run that study. Am I allowed to cuss on this podcast? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. It would have been fucking awful running that study if we had to do weekly check-ins with 25 subjects while also, running a resistance training study. So there was no controlling for that. It was literally, here's your program, sign it on the sheet so that we know that you're here, and send me your workout log so that I know you actually completed them, right? So no control in that regard. Because it was kind of a proof of concept study, we really wanted to make the differences between groups as drastic as possible, just to see if there was going to be any differences at all, right? Now, with respect to how we control for cueing within the same group, like how do we make sure all the research assistants are cueing the same? It's really difficult to do, right? In fact, it's nearly impossible. I'm sure that there are ways to do it, and I'm sure much smarter people will comment below and be like, you're an idiot. How did you not think of this, and this? But with respect to that, like, making sure that like even the encouraging thing, right? Like it's, I don't really need to worry about people being like knees out, or, sit in your heels. Like I don't, cues like that, they're not going to make a huge difference over the course of an 8-week study, I don't think. I'd be shocked if they did. But with respect to motivation, that's where it gets a little bit more challenging. Like if I have one research assistant who can really bring it out of these subjects, like really like motivate them to push harder, and they're maybe going a little bit past failure per se, right? Not because they're helping them or anything, just because they're doing more than they would if maybe a different research assistant is just trying to get like some college credits and they don't really actually care about the game of lifting at all, and they're just like, okay, you did 10, good, rest. Like that's really hard to control for. Fortunately, myself and Ryan Burke, as well as some other individuals, so shout out Ryan Burke and all the other people that helped me with that study, we were there for everything. And we were there in the lab on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from like 8:30 in the morning till 5 p.m. at night consistently, right? So if I ever did see someone maybe not pushing someone super hard, or if I ever saw someone slacking in general, like one of the subjects, I was able to intervene and be like, all right, come on, man, like we got to push on these. Like the whole point here is that we're going to failure. So let's make sure we get that. And it's come down to it before where we had individuals that just weren't pushing to failure, like every single time. And it sucks because you can tell, but it's like somewhat subjective that you can tell. You can't just be like, well, it's my experience, I can tell that you're not pushing to failure. But if the 10th rep looks exactly the same as the first rep, you can be pretty confident that they're not pushing at least close to failure, right? And we've kicked people out of our studies for doing that before. So kind of really long-winded there, and all to say that we don't do a whole lot of controlling for that type of stuff because of how difficult that can be to do.
Yeah, no, we found the exact same. We finished data collection for a study where we had peer instructors versus kind of like usual instructors. So I like comparing older adults delivering resistance training to other older adults versus us delivering resistance training to older adults. And it's that, I suppose, motivational thing, or like you said there, where you're trying to get people up to those higher RPs. An awful lot of that does come down to, I suppose, the soft skills, the personality of the coach, maybe, or a bit more domineering, and people are that little bit afraid to show that kind of softness in front of you or something like that. But it's one thing we saw where we were able to get our participants to train to a much higher intensity than the peers. Is that something you saw similarly in the supervised versus unsupervised group?
So absolutely. So even though it was supervised versus unsupervised, the unsupervised group was very often training in the same gym that we were training the supervised group in, right? Because they were just using the Lehman like gym that was accessible to all students, right? So very commonly we would see individuals in the unsupervised group training, and I would kind of just like jokingly be like, pretend I'm not here, I'm not looking, I'm not watching, you do whatever you want to do. And being the weird lizard brain person, I can't help, and you guys are probably the same way. Even if it's not a study, if you're just in the gym, you're between your sets, you're staring at other people to see just like what they're doing, just because of genuine curiosity. And like very often these individuals were not pushing even remotely close to failure, based on my own like subjective perception of them pushing close to failure. Whereas the individuals that were in the group, I mean, if they consistently didn't push to failure for the entire study, again, they would have been removed from the study. So like most assuredly, and it goes so much deeper than even just like who's yelling louder at the subject. Like you can have just a really good looking research assistant, and like if you have a really good looking female research assistant and you have male subjects, they're gonna be likely to push harder when she's around versus not. And this is like something that did happen on multiple occasions in our lab, where we would have subjects kind of half-assing it a little bit, and then said research assistant would come in, and all of a sudden these people are pushing balls to the walls, no problem. So the controlling for pushing close to failure is really hard to do for a lot of reasons, as you can tell.
Yeah. And I suppose what were the kind of reasons that you saw you did? I did have a good scan of the paper. So you saw, I suppose, better muscular adaptations from the supervised group. What would you put that down to? I suppose obviously you have your results, but you yourself, I suppose, maybe from your own anecdotes, what could you put those better adaptations down to?
Yeah, so I'm really, I thought I'm really embarrassed. I barely remember this study at all, like what the results were. I know that the subjects that were supervised grew more. I knew that they got stronger on the back squat and the isometric stuff, but I think that the bench press was similar between groups. Is that right? As I'm the one that should know the answer to that question, not you. But anyway, the reason I think that largely is probably due to proximity to failure more than anything else. I think that people just push harder when they're being watched. It's a fact that extends beyond resistance training. So the reason we thought to do this study is because of something called the Hawthorne effect, which is a study that was done. I don't know when the study was done, nor do I know much about it at all. However, they were trying to see if turning the dimness of the lights in this factory down would have an effect on productivity. And they were turning the lights down, no change, turning the lights down, no change, to the point where like you didn't see a degradation in work until it was like basically they could not see in front of them. And the reason is because they knew that they were being watched during the course of this study. So they were just working harder than they normally would have been because, whatever psychological phenomenon that is causing that. But I would imagine is the exact same thing with respect to this study. Like, I don't think there's anything magical about the cues we were giving them. I mean, everyone that was training was a personal trainer in some respect or had some sort of personal training certification or getting their master's in human performance and fitness, right? So some degree of experience in that regard. But I think it boils down to proximity to failure much more than any other thing. And that, of course, this is my interpretation of the study. This shouldn't be taken as oak or anything like that. It's just how I perceive the differences there.
Well, Max said, no, yeah, I think that's very fair. I suppose particularly when we are looking at like hypertrophy, it's kind of fairly consistent across all domains. There's a fairly clear picture that if your participants or your athletes are training closer to failure more often, you're probably going to see better outcomes in muscle building.
Yeah, I think that the threshold there is important too, because like if the unsupervised group was doing like 2 to 3 RIR and the supervised group was actually training to momentary muscular failure, I doubt you're going to see drastic differences in 8 weeks. But I mean, you guys have been to gyms before. Like, people don't often train with 2 to 3 RIR. They train with sometimes like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 RIR or 1, 2, 3 RPE for my powerlifting friends out there. So I think had there been less of a discrepancy, then you probably wouldn't see a big of a difference. But because generally people training alone are pushing so far away from failure, that's why we saw the differences that we did.
And where do you see, is there any kind of follow-up study from that element of supervision, or are you kind of finished with that in the lab now?
Yeah, certainly not from me. I'm sure that there will be more, but like, yeah, it's just not something that like interests me that much to continue doing like that. And that kind of goes with most things I do. I very much like having my toes in as many different puddles as possible. I don't want to stick with deloads, for instance, is another example. Like, I'm not trying to do another deload study for a while.
And what kind of things are getting you going now?
Oh man,
what's in the pipeline?
I would love to see how far we can take this long muscle length thing. I would love for Warnicki to do a study where he's comparing individuals doing calf raises and stretching versus just calf raises to see if there's some sort of additive thing there. Like, Warnicki, my brother, please, I'm begging you, give us that study. That's the one we want. A lot of things, man. Like, there's a superset study that Ryan Burke, shout out again, is going to be conducting for his thesis that I think is going to be really interesting. The predictability of muscle growth in a muscle. So like, oftentimes people are talking about like, don't train because tibialis anterior training is like huge these days, for like silly reasons. Like, you're going to like cure the cancer that you have because you're doing tib raises, whatever. But like, oftentimes people say, at least within hypertrophy circles, like, oh, don't bother doing it. Like, it's such a small muscle, it's not going to grow. Like, do we know that? Do we know that the size of the muscle is actually what's predicting its growth potential? Of course not. So that's another area that interests me. I mean, we could talk about areas that interest me for the next 4.5 hours if you guys want to. So I'll stop there.
I think maybe you said something, and I suppose sorry, Shane, you go on.
I was going to say, it'd be very interesting to see how jacked your tib anterior could get. If it was something like, I don't know, like the bicep on the front of your shin.
Yeah, like it would look. I mean, it looks super cool if you had like a really developed tibialis anterior. I've never seen it in like a natural athlete. I've never seen a natural athlete that was like, shit. Did you guys see the front of his tibialis? Like, oh my god. Like, but I'm sure it's possible. I mean, there are like you've seen some gear bodybuilders with giant tibialis anteriors. In fact, the first time I ever even saw that was a muscle you could train, I was like 13 years old, and I was watching a video of, I think it was Kali Muscle or Kai Green, I can't remember, giving a tour of the Mecca in Gold's Gym in California, and he was like, we have everything here, look, we even have this, and did like tibialis anterior raises, and I was like, holy shit, you can see his tibialis anterior. It was like the first time I'd ever even known that was like, I mean, I was like 13, so I didn't, and like, it was like, wow, that's incredible. So it is possible for them to grow, but maybe you just need exogenous like testosterone to do it.
I suppose that was kind of something you mentioned, something that's a bit hot topic at the moment, fairly well debated. So I'd love to hear your thoughts maybe on the stretch-mediated hypertrophy, lengthened partial sphere. So I suppose for anyone that might have listened to, we did a podcast with Milo Wolf, and he did his PhD on lengthened partials, and a lot of what he's putting out is that if you're trying to maximize, or I suppose optimize your hypertrophic stimulus from an exercise, it's probably best to train an exercise within its lengthened range. So what are your thoughts on this, Max?
I mean, I think Milo Wolf is a joke, a clown. Like I don't respect anything that he says. I didn't know he'd clip that and use that as the thing. No, I love Milo. He's a great guy. I've gotten to spend a lot of time with him because he's come over to help us out with studies here in New York. So he's amazing, and I'm certainly not going to argue with the kind of the world's leading expert on long muscle length training, right? And I do generally agree with him. I would be a little bit more tentative in my prescription there, in that like we can be pretty confident that for the muscles that have been studied, the calves seem to respond really well to stretch-mediated hypertrophy. So like I was involved on that interset stretch study where individuals after a set would stretch out their calves for an extra 20 seconds. Warnicki's studies that we were just talking about, they all demonstrate that. And then there is one study, but I don't know who the author is, unfortunately, who just did a lengthened partial on the calves and saw superior growth as well. So very confident about the calves, the glutes, hamstrings studies that just came out, the biceps, the triceps, like those muscles. I'm very confident that we can say, like, I'm pretty sure that even if you're not going to do lengthened partial, just choose your exercises that are biasing the lengthened portion to be the most challenging. So I'm very much in concordance with Milo on this one, in that like a lot of the training that I do is lengthened partial training now. I don't even really understand the discourse. Like I don't understand why we are so anti lengthened partials. And I mean, I know why. It's because a lot of people have like kind of like dogmatically adhered to the full range of motion thing. And I mean, even some people are like making money off of full range of motion being kind of their brand. No fingers pointed here. And that maybe that's why they're a little contentious, but the data is what the data is, or the data are what the data are. What a stupid phrase. That like, yeah, I look, man, like the studies are very clear. I think we have, I believe it is 6 now studies on lengthened partials versus full range of motion, and 5 of the 6 show a benefit in lengthened partials. 1 shows no difference. If I was a betting man, I know what I'm putting my money on. Like, I don't know why there's even contention there at all, right? So that's I don't know if that's clear enough as far as my stance, but yeah, I definitely am team lengthened partial for sure.
Yeah, I think it's Chris Beardsley and Paul Carter would kind of say that an awful lot of the hypertrophy that we see is relative to the degree of the range of motion that the muscle is going through. That obviously at specific ranges of motion we'll get different. They're saying we'll get different activation of, say, at higher degrees,
higher threshold motor units. Like, shut the fuck up, man. Like, relax. Yeah, no. I think that he's right, though. I mean, Paul, like, we do see differential activation of the muscles at different muscle lengths. Why the fuck are we talking about activation? Like, we had to talk about that for a long time because those were the best studies that we had looking at range of motion training, as well as the shortened partial studies that we had as well. There's a good bit of those, but it's a bad proxy for hypertrophy. Like, EMG shows higher amplitudes at shorter muscle lengths. So that right there should be like an alarm bells going off. Also, sorry, I wasn't telling you to shut the fuck up, Lawrence.
I'm okay. I'm all right.
Okay, good. It wasn't. I just like the saying higher threshold motor units are more active at like correct, or maybe, we don't even know if that's true, but like sure, even if it is true, sure. Let's just say the MG shows what the EMG shows, but who cares about EMG if we have studies directly looking at muscle growth? You know, that's kind of like where I stand on the matter.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I suppose you could do plyometrics and activate your HTMUs like quicker as well. So like we're not standing around here, we're not jumping around here doing plyometrics to get jacked.
Yeah, like is activation of higher threshold motor units, is that the key that we're not aware of? Like that's what's necessary for growth? Like I'm not confident saying that.
No, 100%. You mentioned, I think, about kind of like the supersets. So that's obviously an interesting study coming out, but you've done a bit of work on drop sets versus traditional sets. I spent the whole fucking podcast calling him Borge, but his name is Borge. I wanted to fucking kill myself by the end of it when he actually said his name. But so yeah, drop sets versus traditional sets. I suppose there's a distinction here between what Borge was doing, where it's rest pause. Now you were obviously doing drop sets, which means my interpretation of drop sets, feel free to fucking tell me I'm wrong here, but is you're going to take a certain load to failure, I suppose, concentric failure or momentary failure, and then you'll reduce the load and do that for 2 to 3 rounds with minimal rest, I'm assuming, maybe between sets, in the ballpark.
Like you as fuck. So like the even in the paper that we wrote, we talk about how there's not really like a universal consensus with respect to how drop sets are done, and there's not a universal consensus within the scientific literature, and there's certainly not a consensus within the like bro community of how to do a drop set, right? So like for instance, a couple of things that I would tweak to what you just said is that you don't have to go to failure. Like you can go close to failure if you'd like 2 or 3 RIR. 7 or 8 RPE, and then you can drop the load by, some people do like 10%, some people do like 30%. It doesn't really matter. And then again, you can do as many drops as you want. Like you can do 1 drop, that's still a drop set. You can do 3 rounds, like you were saying, that's still a drop set. So, and in the meta-analysis that we wrote, each study had kind of a different way by which they perform drop sets. So you're certainly within the ballpark, and I think there is no like, I can't say that you're right or wrong because we don't have a perfect definition for what a drop set is. So like, absolutely, you're correct.
And I suppose even then, like intuitively, it's kind of funny because drop sets are probably one of the first, I don't know, it kind of sounds like a dirty word, but intensifiers are kind of techniques that gym newbies will do straight off the bat. So can you maybe tell us, are they onto something, or are we better off with our traditional sets?
I mean, have you ever done them? They're certainly onto something. They're fun. Like they're fun. And to quote my friend Spencer Baldwin, they give you a skin splitting pump. So like they're definitely onto something. But the data suggests that, no, there's nothing special about them. Well, actually, I disagree. There is something special about them. If there's multiple studies showing that you get the same exact hypertrophic response from drop sets to traditional training, and it saves you a substantial amount of time, yeah, there's something special there. But outside of the time component, I really don't think there's anything like inherently special about drop sets. I will say for some people, it kind of like lets them get closer to failure. Because like I'm sure you guys have clients where they just don't push to failure. Like no matter what you say, you're like, hey man, this looked like an RPE 6 and you're calling it an RPE 9. Like we gotta figure this out. And I feel like drop sets, you wouldn't want to do this with like y'all strength athletes like doing deadlifts or anything like that. But it is a way that, and I think Zordos talked about this in his mass review of the paper, where he doesn't recommend doing drop sets all the time because it for a lot of people you are training closer to failure when you do drop sets as opposed to some other straight set, right? And then one last like special thing, and this is truly theoretical, like this is just conjecture. I have no backing for this whatsoever at all, other than my own logic, right? I think that drop sets could be a cool way of doing like metabolite, like let's say there is something special about metabolite training, right? High rep burn training, right? Maybe there's something special with respect to type 1 fiber growth, right? I don't know if there is, but whatever, just hear me out. Because for a lot of people, training to failure on like a set of 25 is damn near impossible. Like most people are cutting those sets off because they fucking hurt, not because the muscle is incapable of producing more force, right? But with drop sets, if we're able to kind of get like a similar metabolite sequestration feeling type of thing, you know what I mean? Maybe there's a way of getting that like type 1 specific hypertrophy, not having to do sets in 20 to 25 or 20 to 30 or anything like that. So again, very, very theoretical, but just one potential of why drop sets could be at least worth using in your training.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose where the closer we go to failure with lower load sets, we are probably going to get higher threshold motor units recruited towards the end of that. So I suppose
absolutely
there is some validity. There is definitely some validity to what you're saying there.
Mm-hmm.
I think where I always see issues with drop sets, and again, this is me completely speaking anecdotally. If I was to do drop sets, I would be fried rice for 3 or 4 days afterwards. I find them to be the most fatiguing thing to possibly do. If I knew I was off training, like I had to take a week off training, I would find my nearest leg press, do one drop set to failure, and presumably going to cardiac arrest immediately after the set as well. But yeah, I would definitely say for the more advanced trainee, I think they are probably, Shane, I don't know, you can probably weigh in on this as well, but for the more advanced trainee where you do have the volume requirements maybe aren't as high to progress, I would probably see them as maybe a little bit superfluous in just throwing in a random drop set at the end, unless, like you said, where you're caught for time, you're like, oh fuck, I need to take my biceps to failure here, close to failure pretty quick.
I mean, I'll fucking say, Shane, you go ahead. I've been talking the whole time, please.
I was gonna say that, like, I would include them in my training when I know that I want to get a specific stimulus with like a muscle group I don't want to commit to multiple sets, or I'll find that by doing multiple sets I won't necessarily apply myself as well. And like that's something I'll do with my own clients as well, is, you know, by the time they get to their 5th exercise, they might not necessarily want to do like another 3 sets of 8 to 12. Why not just get them to work up to like a 12 hour max and just get them to do a drop set? Because at least then you're introducing a little bit of novelty to the session. You're also giving them an exercise where they pretty much just have the kind of guideline of pushing as hard as they possibly can, which again can improve their application exercises, other exercises on the program, by just getting better at train to failure. So yeah, again, from my own perspective, as somebody who's maybe a little bit more advanced, you know, I'm just going to utilizing it there in places where maybe I've already done plenty of sets of like leg press or my squats, but maybe I want to do a leg extension, but doing 3 sets or whatever on leg extension could be better served by just doing 1 set all out towards the end of the workout. Yeah, is there a little bit more of recovery time? It's a little bit harder. Like, yes, but I suppose that comes down to how you're structuring your sessions throughout the week versus, you know, you're probably not going to do legs again the day after I do a leg extension drop set. So, you know, if that's an issue, then obviously that comes down to how you're structuring your training throughout the week.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you, Shane. Like, that's actually how I use drop sets now, basically. I use it almost exclusively as a time-saving way of tacking on a substantial amount of volume towards the end of the workout. So I'm never going to have a workout where I have, like, multiple drop sets throughout. But usually what I'll do is, like, I started doing this after the Enos study came out, the 52-set, like, the infamous 52-set thing. I was like, if the data is kind of pointing us in the direction of like, yeah, man, like more is better. Like, I'm sorry, Mike Benser, but more seems to be better in a lot of instances. I think that, you know, I don't want to be like the average workout time in that Enos study towards the end, I think was like 1 hour and 45 minutes or something like that. That's ridiculous for a lot of people. For us, that's like, it's whatever. It's our favorite time of the day. So we'll spend as much time as we need to. But for like your average person, like 2 hours in the gym is fucking crazy. So like what I'll do is I'll do my normal, kind of like what you were saying, Shane, I'll do like 3 sets of leg press and then a couple of sets of something else. And then I'll do some sort of quad focused drop set. That way I'm able to tack on like 4 or 5 sets in the span of like 5 minutes. So that's like a really nice way of using drop sets in my opinion. It's kind of like which is so funny, is like how the bodybuilders have been using it for decades, and I'm not one of those guys that like the bros were right. But the kind of using it just as a way of tacking on a lot more volume in a short period of time is like a really valuable way of using drop sets, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think where even exercise selection probably does come into it, where I think you both kind of hit the nail on the head there, where it's probably single joint exercise late on in the training session. You've probably done your more technically, like for Shane and myself, where I suppose, well, Shane's a powerlifter, I'm functionally retired, but we like, I suppose most powerlifters will probably do something or aim to something for hypertrophy, but taking your like you said earlier on, like you're not going to do a deadlift, but probably taking a bicep curl, a calf raise, a seated hamstring curl, something like that, where there's lots of external stability. There's probably low technical component to it, so that the muscle actually being taken to failure, or can be taken to failure, and even beyond failure, I suppose, is kind of the key of what we're looking for.
Yeah, the criteria that I have for like what exercise, because exercise selection is really important for drop sets, I think, but for like kind of really pragmatic reasons, not so much like the like any like physiological reason. Pin loaded machines are your best friend, and like I don't care if it's single joint or multi joint. Like a chest press machine, like I don't think that's any better or worse than doing like a machine fly or something like that, right? So using something that has a pin loaded stack, that can be really helpful just for the speed of it. Dumbbells can be really helpful, like just to make sure that you're not, spending time taking plates off in between sets, right? Because that kind of like to a certain extent diminishes that time component. And then, choose exercises that aren't going to fucking kill you if you fail. Like, do not do bench pressing by yourself with a drops. I don't even know how you would do that, but don't do that. Like, it's just a silly way. It's just like a surefire way of hurting yourself in the gym. Like, those are the biggest considerations, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a gym somewhere with some 16-year-old after decapitating himself already in the new year with doing a drop set of bench press.
15 days in and
already
killed himself on the bench press. That's tough.
Yeah, actually.
What do you kind of...
I was going to say,
Shane,
last week I had an interesting intensity method programmed for me. I suppose we can get into deloads after this, because I'm going to talk about a pivot week, which I suppose is a type of deload. But John had me work up to a set of 5 out of 9 on safety bar, and after that do 40 seconds on of work with 30% load and 60 seconds off, and do that 4 times. So 40 seconds of
your coach is a sadomasochist, man.
Yes.
That's awful.
Yeah, John hates you.
That's awful. That sounds like excruciating, dude.
Yeah, it was not fun. I was doing like half reps by the time I got to like the 20-second mark. Another 20 seconds to go.
Does he just think you're really unfit, or what's the like?
It's simply because I'm a bodybuilder, so apparently you like this type of stuff. But anyway, if you're listening, John, I don't hate you. But never do that again. But anyway, I suppose a pivot week, like through like the reactive training systems like method, like is a type of deload, and like you've done some research on deloads themselves. So could you tell us a little bit about the kind of paper that you were working through in that kind of regard, and like is taking a traditional deload necessary, and like what would be kind of practical recommendations for actually implementing them?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start with the necessary thing and kind of piggybacking off what Lauren said earlier. Like, man, all this shit is superfluous. We're talking about resistance training. Like, we like to talk about it, and we use big words like metabolite sequestration or satellite cell proliferation or fascicle length, but like, my brother, we're in the gym lifting weights. Like, all of this is superfluous. You know what I mean? How great is it that we get to do this for a living? Anyway, so the interest with respect to the paper on deloads, right? It's and I don't need to, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here because you guys are in this sort of evidence-based circle big time. For like the last like 5 years, man, people have like really been proselytizing the benefits of deloads and talking about the necessity of deloads for optimizing whatever fitness characteristic you're trying to maximize, right? However, before I get to that, and Dr. Pack, David Nolan, Lee Bell, they had an amazing interview study where they interviewed I think it was 24 very high level coaches in strength and physique sport. And all 24 of those coaches used deloads in some sort of way and had some sort of positive regard for deloads in general, right? So clearly they're very popular within the evidence-based side of fitness. However, that is not in concordance with the amount of literature that we had on the topic, right? So before this study, before the one that I conducted, there wasn't any deload study looking at like the potentiating effects of a 1 week period on muscle growth or strength, right? There's a lot of taper literature out there, but nothing with respect to hypertrophy. There's a couple studies that came out of Japan where they had individuals train for like 6 weeks on, 3 weeks off, 6 weeks on, 3 weeks off. And they didn't see much difference between the subjects at the end of the study with respect to growth or strength. There were differences in favor of those that trained continuously and weren't taking 3 week breaks, but they never reached statistical significance. Whatever, that's a whole other thing in of itself. So basically, big gap in the literature, even though it's super popular. So that's what led to the desire to actually do the study itself. And we can break that down a little bit more. Or I can just jump right into like what we actually did. What do y'all want to do?
Yeah, tell us all about it.
Yeah. Okay. So, it's a super simple design, right? We wanted to keep things as straightforward as possible with respect to how we were answering this question, right? So we took 50 individuals. We ended up with 39 because, we're essentially torturing these people twice a week, every week for 9 weeks. So you expect dropouts. So we ended up with 39 individuals. Half were in this group that just trained for 9 weeks straight, and half were in a group that trained for 4 weeks, took 1 week completely away from training. So it was more of a detraining study than a deload study. And I'm sure people will tell me that again in the comments, and then trained for another 4 weeks after that. Right. And we just measured things like the normal things that people talk about in these podcasts, right? Muscle size via ultrasound. We measured strength, muscle endurance, and power, before and after the study. But we also did one more measurement where and then shout out to Dr. Pack because it was his idea to put this on the paper. It's called a readiness to train questionnaire. And it's basically a 7-question list of things that you would normally ask your athlete to see if they needed a deload. Like, how strong do you feel today? How mentally strong do you feel today? What's your appetite look like? How'd you sleep last night? Stuff like that, right? And we did that after the 4th week of training and after the 9th week of training. So a little bit different than the other measurements, right? And now I can, so I guess I should talk about what they did. They came into the gym twice a week with us. They did 5 sets in the 8 to 12 rep range to concentric muscle failure on all the following exercises. Okay. Smith squat, leg extension, seated calf raise, and leg press calf raise. So a straight leg calf raise, right? And then, both groups trained exactly the same. They also had an upper body program that they did on their own 2 days a week. And that was a pretty standard, 10 sets across the major muscle groups of the upper body, just to make sure that they were getting kind of an adequate stimulus there. And they would send me workout logs just to be like, yo, look, we did this upper body workout, right? Cool. That's what we did. At the end of the study, no real difference in muscle growth between groups whatsoever. However, the group that trained continuously saw much better strength gains than those that took a deload in the middle, right? A little bit weird. That was really shocking to me because of how popular things like deload weeks, light days, tapers are, especially within strength sports. So that was really interesting. But the more interesting thing to me was that after the study was concluded, those that trained continuously got less sore in the last week than those that took a deload break. And that kind of makes sense. You have the repeated bout effect, and they were training continuously. So it would make sense they were less sore. However, the group that took a deload in the middle of this study saw a decrease in their motivation to train at that last week. So their motivation to continue to go to the gym decreased, whereas those that trained continuously for the 9 weeks saw no difference or perturbation in their motivation at all. So that was perhaps the single most interesting finding to me across the entire study. And we can break that down a little bit if you guys want. I've been rambling here.
Yeah, no, you're not. You're definitely not rambling. That was very, very coherent. I suppose intuitively it does, you can kind of imagine how that motivation could dip, I suppose, where I suppose I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit about your sample for that study. Were these people that they were already the converted, they were already pretty adherent to resistance training, or were these kinds of your generic kind of 18 to 23-year-old college students that were just looking to get a bit more jacked?
So certainly a mix, right? We have 50 people, so you would never expect it to be a homogenous group of individuals. I have some individuals in there who, we had some subjects that were big fans of Mike Isertel and Eric Helms, they deep in the game, right? You have some that had only been training for a year and didn't know what the fuck was going on. They were just lifting. You know what I mean? So like you have the average training age for these individuals was 4 years. Now, again, we had some that were lifting for 1 year. We had some that had been lifting for like 16 years. So, but it averaged out to be about 4 years of training experience. So kind of intermediate, slightly on the more beginner side, but definitely an intermediate trainee was like the average population. With respect to that, though, I think that's a really interesting kind of tail off of this conversation is that I wonder, had it been 50 Max Coleman's like and all the like people that are like really in the game of evidence-based fitness who have been told for the last like 5 years that deloads are really beneficial, I would imagine they would have not seen like some sort of decrease in motivation, right? Or some perturbation there, or like they probably would have gone into that week off thinking, oh hell yeah, I'm about to get so resensitized to growth, man. And then as opposed to these individuals who are, not losers, who have other things to do in life other than learn about resistance training and like friends and hobbies and stuff like that, who just heard you have to take a week off the gym. And they're thinking like, fuck, I just got into the groove of things and now I'm taking a week off and now I have to come back. Like, I would imagine they are more likely to have like a perturbation in their motivation as opposed to people who maybe go into that thinking that it's going to be a positive thing, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely makes sense. I suppose this is where maybe the argument comes into planned versus reactive deloads, and I suppose that readiness to train the pack would have put in. I think an awful lot of at least powerlifting coaches, and I wouldn't know as many bodybuilding coaches, but powerlifting coaches would probably track some readiness in their athletes. So like if you can kind of see, look, motivation to train is low, readiness to train is low, you're maybe flagging here, sleep is shit, maybe your lifts probably still look fine, like you're still progressing there, so we might leave you alone for a week, but we can probably make an educated guess that in a week or two we're going to have to pull the trigger on the deload. But where I suppose I would see things is that if you're a coach and you're proactively deloading, or you've planned deloads, and I suppose where I would make the distinction is that if you're an athlete, it does maybe take away a little bit of momentum, like you said, where if you're maybe a you or a me, that if you've a 6-week training block or a 10-week training block and you're getting to the end of it and you're still kind of going, fuck, this is good now, I've 3 or 4 weeks left in me now to really fry myself, you don't want to take that week. And I suppose where in powerlifting terms, I'm just talking about powerlifters because that's our game, but it's it probably was within the conjugate West Side system. It probably was written in that, okay, after 4 weeks of training, you are going to be fucked. So no matter what way you spin the wheel, you're going to have to deload after 4 weeks. But I suppose with the rise of I suppose maybe emerging strategies, and Shane might be able to talk a bit more about this, and maybe kind of like newer age powerlifting and I suppose hypertrophy coaching, where we are kind of seeing that longer blocks or longer accumulation blocks or for building volume and building intensity are probably going to be better than sticking in a random deload every 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, I think, Shane, do you have anything you want to add to that before?
Well, I suppose like with the maybe more West Side style of like the 4 week waves, like each week you do have a notable rise in like intensity. So you could be going up like from 7 RP, 8 RP, 9 RP, all the way up to like max effort. Whereas like with the more emergent strategies framework, you are repeating the same level of training intensity. So you could be doing like a set at 8 every single week until you are no longer able to adapt to it or add weight, right? Because like then some weeks you add a lot to the bar, some weeks you stay the same, some weeks may see a decrease. But then because you're going to run the exact same level of kind of training, intensity week to week, your blocks might run a little bit longer depending on like what your level of adaptation is like, depending on your recovery. Whereas like if you know each week that you have 4 weeks and you have a notable rise, like you're increasing 10, 20 kilos or something like a week, there's going to be a point at which you can no longer add more load or you'll break, right? So when it comes to like hypertrophy, I would say because you will have people in a certain degree where they're probably maintaining a certain level of training intensity week to week, right? You're training to failure every single week. Like you, again, it depends on what your recovery is going to be like in your individual tolerance. Like some people might be able to go 6 weeks of a training block, other people may be able to go 8, other people may be able to go 12, right? And again, that comes down to the individuality of it, because again, I'd have clients who they might only be able to handle 4 weeks of training before they feel like that they're getting aches, they're noting training regressions, but then others can go for double the length. And there's not much difference in like the overall kind of structure of the program, and it's just they're individuals. Everybody's going to tolerate different things. So, it's quite, I suppose, in that kind of regard, it kind of makes studying deloads harder, because even in the sample that you had, Max, like you're going to have people who the 4 weeks of training for them is sufficient, and other people, they could again handle double the amount of training stress before they need to take a step back.
Yeah, I mean, like, so we asked every subject on the final day of testing, not even training. So like the study was done, and they would come in and we would ask them like, are you going to take a deload? Like, you're going to take a break from the gym and or are you just like ready to get back to it? And like every single subject was like, we don't need a break. We're just going to get back to training. Like even the subjects in the 9-week group that were doing 20 sets of quads to failure every single like week for 9 weeks did not need a deload at all. Like they were like, no, we're just going to get back to training. Like we're excited to not do 5 sets on every exercise, but we're just getting right back to it. Like some individuals agreed, like need a deload every 3 weeks. Like they just, and I think that what it comes down to is preference. Because a lot of people, myself included, for a long time, like have like being the lizard brain person that I am, like I really liked things being in their respective zones. Like I liked knowing that I was going to push hard as fuck for the next 4 weeks, and then I was going to get a week that was going to be nice and easy, and I could focus on work, could just chill, and then get right back to it. Like there's something about that like cyclical, very block nature that like really resonates with a lot of people's brains and people really enjoy. But now my deloads look very different than they used to look, and that kind of started changing like well before I even started data collection. But I basically, this boils down to, I agree with both of you. I think that taking an individualized approach, I mean, that's like the whole game, isn't it? But like taking an individualized approach to deloads, like does your person want a week off? Give it to them, because the data is clear, that the data are clear, whatever, that it's not going to fuck up their progress. Like your muscle's not going to fall off your bone, even if you don't train at all, which is not how I'm sure most of y'all's deloads look like for your clients, right? On the other hand, if your clients like hate that deload week, let's try and structure their training in a way where they don't need to take a deload every 4 weeks. Maybe they don't need to take a deload until it's time for them to go on vacation from their job, and we'll just work in a deload that way. I think that that's probably the best way to go about it. And then of course, auto-regulating throughout the entire thing. Like if you have that client that never wants a deload, but they've been training for 11 weeks and they're like clearly stalling out, yeah, maybe it's worth throwing them a deload.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think it's where I suppose an awful lot of the what I thought was interesting about the interview study with coaches the PAC did was that deloads were seen as a necessary for performance an awful lot of the time, and I think that's kind of where the fallout of that study kind of was, that it was like, oh, all of these really high level coaches and athletes are like have to deload, but like the evidence for it was quite sparse. And I think that's where like what an awful lot of what we've spoken about, like the psychosocial thing of managing an athlete, the soft skill of being like, okay, look, we're gonna go for 4 weeks. Like yourself, you're like, I love structure. I love 4 weeks of blast and 1 week of pulling back, 4 weeks of blast and 1 week of pulling back. Or in the case of like other people, it's the thought of a deload crucifies them. They're like, oh, I'm really anal about training. I can't have any unproductive training. It's like there's a guy I coach, and he like on a deload, he just mentally falls apart. He's like, I'm lifting light weights. I'm not doing anything beneficial. Tried pivot weeks with him. Fucking hates them. He's like, why am I doing stupid fucking variations? I hate this. So all we do, we keep his, like, rather than going up into like higher, like you said, rather than going up into those higher RPEs, we just, as soon as we start flag, we'll just change the goalposts a little bit, and re-go. But I suppose where I would like to see, definitely in powerlifting, like it's within the zeitgeist that you have to deload. Yeah, and that's kind of some data I would like to see is that, and like you said earlier, we've pretty strong data on tapering. I suppose maybe not as much in what's the word I'm looking for? We do have tapering data in powerlifters, but I suppose some of the tapering strategies aren't consistent across all coaches.
Oh yeah, definitely not.
And that's again like another fucking can of worms. But I think where deloads are concerned, I suppose an awful lot of it isn't necessarily performance; it's mitigating fatigue, which has knock-on effects on performance. I suppose the distinction I would always like to make to my athletes is that you have the concept of fatigue is kind of a funny one within sports science, because if you ask a sports scientist or an exercise physiologist what fatigue is, it's you're doing an activity and it has knock-on effects on muscular performance or VO2 max or something. So you do something and it has negative effects on subsequent performances. Whereas I suppose culturally we equate fatigue to tiredness. And I suppose where that tiredness or kind of nearly like a training jet lag can seep in, and people can have a string of training sessions where they're going into the gym and they're feeling shit. But I would always kind of perceived fatigue versus performance fatigue are not the same thing, and that's kind of where I would like Shane was talking a couple of months ago about a training block where he would have said he was cooked, but John was like, no, you have 2 more weeks. And that's like, I suppose that's you down to you as a coach weighing up the pros and cons of like, okay, am I gonna put this man back in the oven, or do we need to shift things a little bit? But yeah, that was a ramble. I'm really sorry.
No, you're good. I think, and there was a lot there. Like, so with respect to Shane, like if Shane told me like, look, man, like I'm exhausted, like I'm beat up, and I'm like, okay, but you're performing really well. And because your kind of income and like your life is predicated around your body and your like performance in the gym, which sucks that that's the case, but it's how it works for a lot of people in this field. Like, we got to push it, man. Sorry. Like you're doing really well and we got to push it. Now, if it was anyone else on the planet, like who wasn't in this circle, I'd be like, yeah, take your week off, man. Who gives a fuck? Like, enjoy your week off. Like, you're burned out. I agree. Like, it's not worth pushing someone past their limit if they don't want to do so. You know what I mean? Like, if there's no like real benefit to it, like pushing yourself those extra couple of weeks towards the end of a block for individuals like yourselves, like that could be the difference between first and last place in a powerlifting meet, right? But you're taking your shirt off at the end of the year at the company pool party. Like, no one's going to be like, damn, he clearly takes a deload every 5 weeks. Like, he looks like shit. You know what I mean? Like, it depends on the athlete, like you were saying. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I suppose it's going to be something, I suppose, that like I would love to see kind of done a little bit more in the powerlifting sphere, just to see what happens if we proactively deload versus reactively deload. Shane, was there anything you kind of wanted to axe Max?
Just to add to, I suppose, the case of like proactively deloading, like that's like one thing I definitely do more often with my clients now, because some of them, again, they're going to have relatively stable block lengths that they can handle, but then other blocks, again, for whatever reason, they might be able to handle a few more weeks of a volume block or a few more weeks of an intensity block, and that's just a case of, you're still seeing that person's numbers increase week to week. They're not reporting any adverse signs of fatigue, and you just say, let's keep going, and similar in that concept, similar kind of conditions of like, somebody says that they're feeling beat up, but again, you're kind of noticing that all other metrics are going in the right direction. That just calls for you to be the coach and say, look, we're still getting the kind of return on investment that we want. Sometimes these like niggles or aches, they might just pop up and we just have to navigate around them. Can we decrease maybe our volume or intensity on an accessory movement or something like that that's not contributing as much towards the actual kind of benchmark that we're setting? So yeah, again, it just comes down to being able to kind of play the cards as you see them, as opposed to having these like specific things. Because I used to say to all my clients, like, every 4 weeks you'd have to deload, and that was like based off really old like information that I would have gotten when I was first started learning about deloads. And it would have been like, okay, week 1 you do four reps in reserve, third week you do 3 reps in reserve, and all the way up to, you know, failure. But then I suppose the more I even think about it now, those weeks where you're doing 4 reps in reserve, where that's programmed, what if you're really good to push harder, you know? And then you, maybe the 4 reps in reserve that you think about there, because it's so far away from failure as well, still is actually 6 reps in reserve, you know? So it's harder. So it's like the more I think about it, the more I'll almost like pushing just closer to that limit, like, makes more sense more often. And then just as, you know, you're kind of noticing those kind of decreases to take the likes of the deloads.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Like, some athletes are, or some clients are just, like, I feel really bad because I kind of like placeboed one of my clients into thinking that he needed a deload every 4 weeks. And so now, like, that the data is what he is, he's like, hey man, I kind of need a break. And I'm like, do you? Or is that my fault for telling you that you did in the first couple of months of our relationship? Like, I think you're fine, man. Like, your numbers are going up like consistently and well. Like, I'll give you a break if you want one, but let's make sure that you actually, and you can even just say you want it. That's totally fine as well. Like, if you just want a break, I'll give it to you. But do you need it? Probably not. I've kind of like really changed my stance on this. I'm like big on team anti-fragile now, in that like I you know, we can recover from a lot more than we've been told that we can recover from, especially in the last 5 years. Like, we kind of pulled that thing back, where for a long time it was do more, go harder, go home type of mentality with this shit. And then in the last like 5 years or so, we've really tried to pull that back, and maybe to, you know, like, for a positive reason. Like, we probably don't need to be going past failure for 40 sets of chest every single week, right? But I think maybe the pendulum has swung a little bit too far, and we're like, if I go 0 RR, I'm going to be fucked for 2 weeks, and my mTOR pathways are going to be all out of whack. So, like, yeah, I think that I'm kind of with you, Shane. Like, maybe it's worth pushing people a little bit harder than I have been in the past.
Yeah. I would be.
I suppose what I'm. Sorry, Shane, you go ahead, lad.
I was gonna say, I would be full bore on like, you need to go to failure all the time, like, you know, kind of Dorian Yates, past failure, all that kind of stuff. It's just, you know, you definitely want to have some kind of consistent end point to your sets, right? And pushing to where those reps are really starting to slow down, it's very difficult to get that last rep. Like, that's as consistent as you can really get, you know.
Mm-hmm. It's why we use failure in research, just because it's the easiest way of quantifying. Like, okay, that is like the way of equating individuals across groups. Like, I don't care how good you are at telling me you're 2 RIR. I don't need to, because you're failing, and that's very clear to me that you're failing, right? So yeah, absolutely. It's just a nice, clean understanding that a stimulus was achieved. I'm gonna grab another water. I'll be right back.
Grand lad, you're no rush.
I
always think though, John, like, for go on.
You go on.
I know. I was just saying. I always do think in a powerlifting sense, it is that little bit different to bodybuilding, I suppose, where you, like, failure is not for most powerlifters on the cards, and I suppose that's kind of where where the club Shane and I train in here in Ireland. It's kind of we're kind of infamous. Well, I work there, but kind of infamous for our attitudes towards failure. So we have the wheel of misfortune. So if you fail a lift, there's a series of how would you, I suppose, forfeits or
Punishments.
humiliation, public humiliation, I suppose, could be one way of putting it. So one of them, so if you fail a lift, you spin the wheel of misfortune, and one of the punishments, we have a guy in our gym, he's a bit like, you have to load his bar for the week for him. You have to clean the gym. You have to stand on a chair in the middle of the gym for 15 minutes in the middle of your training session. Another one is clean the bars. Another one is clean the toilets. So yeah,
If you fail any lift at all,
any lift doesn't matter.
so like if you go to failure on lateral raises, like you're
No.
You're like
SBD,
squat, bench,
SBD.
okay.
your competition work.
Okay, I'm with you now. If you miss a lift, like that's like okay, I'm with you now.
Yeah.
That makes a little bit
So,
more sense. Not a whole lot more sense, but a little bit more sense than going to failure on lateral raises. And to be clear, like anytime I'm talking about hypertrophy. I don't give a fuck about strength, and I don't know any it's just not my world. So when I'm talking, I think that's important. That's an important note. Like I'm talking about muscle growth. Unless I'm clarified otherwise, I'm talking about muscle growth almost universally.
Yeah, that's for anyone that can't see Max's face. There's nothing about Max's face that says he does powerlifting anyway. He's a bit too fine groomed, but
pretty boy,
yeah,
as it were.
Yeah, pretty boy. But yeah, so like I mean, it's in the world of powerlifting. I think where that data gets quite interesting. Where like if we look at what the adaptations for strength versus hypertrophy that probably staying further from failure with higher intensity loads are probably going to drive better adaptations, getting more first reps, more fast reps with a certain load. But then you draw in the need for accessories, and I think Shane made maybe a good point there earlier, where I think a good strategy with maybe your accessory lifts for someone to incorporate into deloads is maybe just reducing the RP or the total number of sets, or going kind of down that avenue. With the deloads you would plan for your athletes' backs, are you kind of is there ever a time when you will take a week off training? Because I think in powerlifting, and I don't know if it's as common in bodybuilding, but people find it, because people are just fucking control freaks, but people find it really fucking hard to take a week off training. Like Shane will go to Mexico or the outer rings of fucking Saturn and he'll find a gym. So Shane is extremely neurotic, as you can see. But I do the same thing. But people find it hard to take weeks off training. Is there ever a time where you're like, just fucking take a week off, man, like just chill? Or are you just reducing load, reducing RP?
So there's no like universal way to deload. So we actually didn't even have a definition for deload until pretty recently, when the second round of that interview study turned into a survey study, and we actually came up with, and I was fortunate enough to work on the survey study. We came up with a definition for what deloads are, which is nice. It's basically what we've been saying, like a week of reduced training volume or intensity with the goal of reducing fatigue and potentiating better adaptations, right? So there's no, I don't have like the Coleman et al. Deload paradigm that I follow by any means. I take it very much on an individual basis, and for because a lot of my, I wouldn't even call my clients athletes. Like most of my clients are just gen pop people looking to get jacked, right? And most of them don't compete in anything. So their deloads come down to, oh, you're going to Mexico for a week? Have fun. Like, don't worry about training at all. Now, look, when I'm on vacation, training at new gyms is like, that's like why I go on vacation. Like, that's fun as fuck to me. Like, I love that. So I'm like, y'all, I want to lift on vacation. Like, I went up to the cabins this summer, like somewhere in Georgia, and I brought my like adjustable power blocks and my adjustable bench with me to the cabin so that I could work out there. So for me, I don't like structure my deloads in that regard. Like the way that I do deloads for myself is I'll train for like 6-7 weeks, and then on the 7th week I'll be like, damn, I'm not feeling great. Like I kind of like, I'm starting to feel this exercise in my rotator cuff more than my deltoids, or like my lower back's feeling weird, my knees are feeling weird, whatever it may be. I'm going to take the rest of the week. So usually what I do is I'll train for like 2 or 3 days, and then I'll literally just take the rest of the week completely off of training, right? For some athletes, for some of my clients, they really like that structure, and they like doing like a reduced week of like half the volume that they normally would. Some hate that and would rather do the same amount of volume with less intensity. I give that to them, right? But when it comes to like things like vacation, because usually I let their life dictate when their deload is going to happen. Like, oh, you're traveling for work, let's pull it back so that you can really focus on that, right? And if they're individuals, like if I have clients like myself or like the two of you, I'll say, yeah, I mean, if you can find a gym there, be my guest, but don't worry about it. Like nothing's going to happen if you don't train for this week. And then other clients, like, you know, normal motherfuckers, unlike us, I just say, don't train. Like go enjoy your vacation, focus on work. If you're traveling for work, like do that. And don't worry about the rest. Now, with respect to like actual deloads for clients who like enjoy that, it's the same exact thing that I was just saying, where if you're someone who, because the whole point of this is to reduce fatigue. And if I'm giving you an exercise or a routine that you hate, like even if the physiological fatigue is reducing because you're doing less total work, you're going in the gym and you're doing something that like you hate and makes you miserable for an hour, 3-4 times a week, like that's not going to do much for fatigue. You know what I mean? Like that's just making someone more miserable, right? So I'll try and structure it in a way that is at least still enjoyable. I really like the way Alberto Nunez does it. Like he does it kind of like basically like transition weeks. Like you put in some new exercises there with very low volumes and intensity just to like feel out the exercise before you actually go in the next week and like start your mesocycle. I think that's a really good way of doing it. I mean, there's like a limitless, I mean, we could sit here for the next 2 hours coming up with different ways that we can get our athletes to deload. And basically, I'll end it here because I've been rambling a lot, but I just tailor it to the athlete themselves. Like if they hate deloads, I'm probably going to structure training in a way that they have to take them as little as possible. If they really like deloads and they like different, like the block periodization model, then we'll do that. And the deloads will kind of come down to whatever keeps them in the gym for the longest. Yeah. Over the course of a career, not within that deload week, obviously.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think that's all, like it's very pragmatic, and I think where I think like both of you said it, so I don't need to repeat it one more time. But that n equals 1 thing is obviously the caveat to all of what we do. Where I do always like you're talking to second year, maybe not first years, but second year, third year sports science students, exercise science students, and they're like, oh, this paper says, but you do kind of have to bring it back to, for an awful lot of people, that like while there might be an abundance of data even within studies where we have an abundance of data on, we still have like non-responders, or we have people where the training effects aren't as strong in them. And I suppose that's kind of where it comes back to the individualized approach that we would hope to fuck that most people are following. Is there any kind of hypertrophy stuff that is coming out, the people that you're like excited? I know you mentioned something about like supersets earlier. Is there any kind of exciting stuff coming out that people should keep an eye out for? Because I think the sphere at the moment is quite interesting, and like I think for like, I'm obviously not involved in hypertrophy research, but it's something I think that's quite a changing field in the last even like 6 or 7 years, like you said, where the pendulum has shifted so far to don't what was it? It was don't do too much. Now it's gone to do more, and it might, God knows, shift back again. So what do you see coming out in the next while?
So yeah, obviously that superset study is going to be really cool. There's a really cool study. This is like not even my lab, so I can't say too much about it, but Daniel Plotkin, shout out the homie, was just involved on a really cool study looking at training, detraining, retraining. That's going to be in trained and untrained lifters. That's going to be really cool. The guys at Data Different Strength, I think, are working on a volume meta-analysis similar to or meta-regression similar to the intensity meta-regression that they just did. I think that's going to be a really, really cool study. We got a bunch of, it's like a really cool eccentric overload study for power production and weightlifting athletes coming out of the AMDL, like the Lehman Applied Muscle Development Lab. That's going to be really cool. Yeah, I mean, exercise science as a whole started in the 1960s. I mean, this field is in its infancy. Like, people don't really realize that. Like, there's so much shit we don't know that has just like not been studied. Like, for instance, I doubt we'll get to it today because of time, but like this technique paper that we just wrote, that Dr. Pack took the lead on, and I was fortunate enough to help with. Like, man, like there's like no studies on lifting to like use good form. Like that study doesn't exist, and yet it's constantly like proliferated throughout the community to say like use good form, right? So the field, like you were kind of saying, like it's constantly changing because any science that is new will constantly be changing because we're coming up with new and new ways of measuring things. And we're also doing replication studies that are giving us better insights into things that we already know. Like there's a lot of cool stuff that's going to be coming out in the next 5 years and a lot of cool stuff that's probably going to be coming out in the next 10 years. So definitely really excited.
No, 100%. And I think that's where I think even to say like it's 60 years old, like I suppose where the an awful lot of the body of research on in at least hypertrophy and resistance training, it was a knee high to a grasshopper in the 80s and 90s. Like we had such small amount of data on an awful lot of topics. Like when I think about my area, resistance training for older adults, like I mean the oldest papers I can probably find are from the 80s. So like I mean you're talking 40, 50 years old.
We thought for like in the 80s, we were convinced that lifting after you were 50 years old was pointless because like you weren't going to get any adaptations at all. And like now we know that that's fucking stupid, like obviously. So yeah. Like even in like where it's the most important, like resistance training for like longevity and health in geriatric individuals is probably the single like most important area of this field because it has like, I mean, look, man, like I fucking love what I do, but we're trying to make jacked people more jacked. It's not exactly something the government's like, let's throw billions of dollars towards that. But making geriatric individuals more independent in their older years is something we really care about. And even that is an area that has like so little data on it as a whole.
Yeah, the ceiling on that has definitely yet to be reached. Is there anything kind of that I actually don't know like you're a face I can't put an age on, like are you like same as me and Shane, like late 20s, or are you?
Oh, I turned 16 last week. No, I'm 25. I'm 25.
So like how long you lifted?
So I started lifting when I was like 12 years old. I got into it really young. Really fortunate that like my dad kind of worked out at home, kind of like. And I saw the Wolverine movie when I was pretty young, and I was like, "That's the goal. That's what I want." And so I got into it at a pretty young age, and kind of fell in love with it pretty quickly.
Yeah, like me and Shane talk about this all the time, but like I started lifting when I was like 15, so it's about 12 years ago. And like even in the span where I've been training, the pendulum has shifted left and right, and on so many topics. I think even for me at this young age to be like, oh, there's so many things that I've changed my mind on in the last 3 or 4 years, I think is kind of a testament to how fast things do change in our area. And like the general gist of like I suppose what we would take for granted now were like there are certain things that like even 10 years ago just weren't the case, like to be the case where we're looking at the concept of effective reps, that probably wasn't really there. An awful lot of the anecdotes was that staying maybe doing more sets further from and staying further from failure was going to facilitate a little more growth. So I think that's kind of exciting.
Incredibly, yeah. Just sorry, you just like I like Milo Wolf disproved, but like really questioned the whole full range of motion thing. Something that was like fundamental to like muscle growth, like was just changed. Like my friend's getting his PhD in quantum, like theoretical quantum mechanics right now. How often do you think his professors change their mind about shit? Like, oh, turns out, gravity's less of a force and more of a, like, that shit's pretty static. You know what I mean? Like, it's very uncommon for people to, like you said, like I'm 13, my training age is 13 years old, and my mind has changed in the last 6 months about like 6 different things. Like, so it's an exciting time to be in this world, in my opinion. I'm sorry, I'll shut up so you can do your outro.
I'm all for it. Come here, we both really want to thank you for coming on. Is there anything else, Shane, you wanted to go through with Max or ask?
I suppose we probably won't get we don't really have time to kind of cover the technique paper, but you potentially get yourself and Pac on to talk about that in a future one, if you'd be up for it.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Obviously, need to confirm with him.
I'll sit here and listen to y'all's brogues fucking hours a week, man. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, just listening to you guys talk is my favorite thing on the planet. So I'll be happy to come back.
That's fine. That's fine. That we're happy with that. You sound like do you know, like when there's a voiceover of like a superhero film?
Yeah, I'll take that if that's what you're getting at. I'll take that anytime. That's amazing.
And the Batman is now like that's I'm genuinely expecting fucking Deadpool or someone to creep in here behind you, but yeah, lad, we really appreciated that. I loved that conversation. That was brilliant. I think you presented some and I love that when you have someone that's really heavy into the science, heavy into evidence based, but you can have you feel like you're having an actual conversation with rather than just exchanging information. So I'm sure any of your students fucking love to see you walk into the classroom, man. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. That was very nice. I appreciate it.
Max, do you want to tell people where they can find you? Not your
yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I live in no, I'm on Instagram at Coleman et al. I'm sure it'll be like linked in show notes and stuff like that, but coleman.et.al. And I'm really only on Instagram, and then ResearchGate for like the true nerds out there. If you want to follow me on there, if you just type in Max Coleman, I'll be like one of the first things that comes up.
Perfect. Unreal.
That's it. Yeah, that's all I have to plug. Yeah, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Lovely. Well, if you did enjoy the conversation, do make sure to leave us a rating and review, 5 stars of course. Share us on your Instagram stories, give Max a follow, read his stuff, and we'll catch you in the next one.